Hello Earth 616. Thanks for tuning in. Before I jump into the meat of today's episode, I would just like to take a moment to clear up some issues regarding the podcast's direction going forward. First off, some of you might notice that this episode has been retconned to be episode 1, part 1, despite not actually being the first episode uploaded. This has happened for a few different reasons, but rest assured that I will be covering memorable Marvel Champions moments in a future episode, including the wonderful responses received from the community. If you have your own memorable moments from the game's first year, please feel free to keep sending them or any other questions or topics you may have for the show through our email address at 616mcpodcast@gmail.com. I hope to be able to revisit the community mailbag format down the line sometime. But for the next few episodes, we have some great discussions tying into the Hydra Rising crossover event and the Rise of Red Skull campaign. Secondly, I hope you'll forgive me for these first few episodes while I learn to improve and perfect my audio production and voiceover work. I don't think it's too horrible for the moment, but thank you for bearing up while I level up my content creation skills over the next few episodes. Lastly, this episode features a discussion I had with Earth Dragon that ended up being a couple of hours long in total. So in the interest of keeping each upload at a reasonable running length, I've decided to split it up into 2 parts. Keep your eyes out for part 2 within the next week or so, and the second half of the decks to be covered in parts 3 and 4 to be published in a few weeks' time. Please enjoy episode 1, part 1. First episode of the Across the 616 podcast. My name's Scott and welcome to the new episode. Today's special guest is Earth Dragon from the Marvel Champions Discord and the Board Game Geek forums. A couple of weeks ago, I reached out to Earth Dragon regarding a list of underrepresented hero and aspect combinations he'd noticed while going through the playthrough statistics on the Board Game Geek forums. Earth Dragon, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. If you recognize me on the Discord or Board Game Geek, I go by Earth Dragon on both of those formats. I got the game when I just saw it when it was coming out new. Didn't actually know anything about it. Just saw that it was a Marvel card game. Was a huge fan of Sentinels of the Multiverse. So I was looking for something similar to that, hoping it was somewhere in that ballpark. I also hadn't played too many living card games, but I noticed it was a living card game. But I have a huge Magic the Gathering background. Have a giant collection there. It was of interest, and I picked it up. Thought. Didn't think much of it on the first play, honestly. But I've heard a lot of people, that was their experience, that they played it once or twice and just thought, yeah, it's okay. But then, friends came over, said, well, let's play it. And then the rest is history. It's at this point, one of my favorite games of all time. And I think with the more heroes and in particular, the more scenarios and villains that come out, the game does get better. And hopefully they just keep refining it and make it a little bit more challenging here as we move forward.
I got you on today to have a chat about this list that I've kind of started referring to internally as the off-meta list. Obviously, being a living card game and not competitive in any sense, saying that something is meta or off meta is can be on the nose to some people, but it's just kind of my frame of reference for for it.
Sure.
So first of all, I'm just wondering, how did the list come about, and where are you kind of getting your stats? How are you collecting your stats, etc.?
A lot of it comes from Board Game Geek. One of the posters there, Dormammu, posted a data entry spreadsheet where you can go in there and enter game results just to kind of get a general feel of how things were performing, which scenarios, how they perform at different player counts, solo, multiplayer, which modules perform with different scenarios, which heroes perform with different aspects. So it's broken down decently well, and all the credit to Dormammu for putting that together. But one of the things that you start to notice is that certain heroes get used with some aspects a lot, and it's not even always the ones that you'd think that they'd get used with or the ones that you'd assume they work best with. I think there's a couple that the ones they're packaged with aren't even their most played aspect. That's typically the case just because guys are playing it right out of there. But it's just interesting data mining, I guess you could call. It's hard to say it's factual just because it's not vetted. It's no one's recording it and being able to say, oh well, you didn't play the game right, so that doesn't count. Or hey, right before you played that game, you drew up and you decided after your mulligan that you weren't going to play. You redrew, so that was technically a loss. You know what I'm saying? There's none of that stuff like enforcing it. It is just people's own submissions, but it does kind of run parallel to what a lot of us would observe privately as to who does better, which aspects are good with which heroes and that kind of stuff. So just looking at that, I was curious just to run through the Rise of Red Skull campaign with some of the lesser played aspects for each hero. And one, to get some information into the database, and two, just to see for my own intrigue, why are these why aren't these played as much, right, as the other aspects? Is there dysfunction currently? Is it just they are inherently better with something else? And I think it's really all over the map as to why they're lesser played. Some of it's just, I think, thematically they just fit differently. But in one particular case that we'll talk about today, I think it's actually that character's best aspect solo. And it's just a little odd that not more people have picked up on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as we go through these decks, we might kind of discuss each individually as to why it might be seeing the love it deserves and is a little underrepresented as a result. So just so everyone's on the same page, the list that Earth Dragon has come up with based on these stats is 13 decks big. We're going to be looking at the first 7 today.
6. I haven't quite made it through the 7th one yet. So, but I'll touch on that a little bit. But there's 13, so it's we're still on one side of half. So we'll just have to do 7 next time. I apologize.
That's okay. Do we want to let the listeners know the entire list now and give them a heads up and allow them to kind of build their takes on the ones that we haven't covered in preparation for the following episode? So that's fine. So the entire list is Black Panther Justice, Black Widow Leadership, Captain America Aggression, Captain Marvel Protection, Doctor Strange Aggression, Hawkeye Protection, and those are the ones we're covering today. The other half of the list, which we'll be covering next episode, includes Hulk Justice, Iron Man Leadership, Ms. Marvel Justice, She-Hulk with Protection, Spider-Man Aggression, Spider-Woman using justice and leadership, and Thor in leadership. So there's definitely some combinations there that immediately stand out as interesting to me. But we'll kind of get into more detail discussing each of them. So first on the list was Black Panther Justice, which was, funnily enough, I think the first aspect combination I played Black Panther with when I first received the core set box. So why do you think Black Panther and Justice is kind of underappreciated?
I think it's natural for a lot of the guys with decent thwart, right? If they can kind of hold their own in that venue, you naturally push somewhere else. I kind of think that's where they go. And Justice is just starting to, I think, with that whole pack with like Beat Cop, with being able to nuke minions and things like that, Justice is starting to kind of have other supplements where it's becoming a hold down the table aspect, just as much as it's a take care of the main scheme and side scheme, right? So I think as it develops more fully to where it has a lot of minion mitigation showing up and supplemental damage, you will see it kind of, I think some of the guys who have decent inherent thwarting are going to start to favor it depending on who they are, just because they'll be able to dip into more of those other mitigation factors and not just rely on the justice aspect to do the thwarting for them.
Yeah, I think Justice so far has been, at times, has been a little bit vanilla to play. I think it's
absolutely.
It's okay where you've got heroes that have their kit is naturally interesting or fun or has that plays well without necessarily needing to be heavily flavored by the rest of the aspect. So I hope that we find Justice going in a different direction going forward. I feel like Justice needs to, hope for it for the sake of its flavor long term, needs to start having a second identity.
Sure, and I think it might come down to a little bit better minion control, right? So it might fall into that board state control, or like you said, be able to kind of protect your assets. Whereas protection would be more of the raw avoiding damage. Maybe digging an upgrade out of the discard pile, or I mean that's a fair point. One thing I doubt we'll see in Justice is healing. I honestly doubt that we'll ever see that outside of maybe a minion healing itself for some reason, just because it kind of lends itself to go swing back and recover. So you might see like a hit and run card eventually, right? So do 3 damage and flip. Right. And so it's something like that to where then you can, exhaust to recover that turn and then flip back and still play some more actual cards in hero mode. So that's the kind of thing I would think that you'd be able to do to beat around that. And that's the stuff I hope they do to kind of, I don't know what their notes are, obviously, on how the aspects are really segregated, but if I don't know how familiar you are with Magic the Gathering. 6 or 7 years after
all of my adult life.
No, fair enough. Yeah. If you remember, they had to kind of really, they say it was redefined. Honestly, it finally got defined, right? Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they finally really locked down what that color wheel was supposed to do. Because if you look back at the first few sets, it was all over the place. Everything was just kind of doing everything. Everything was countering. Everything was damaging. Everybody had access to almost everything, just in wacky ways. And then they really defined it, and I think that it boldened the game, because part of what defines a color or aspect or section of a game is not just what it's good at, but what it can't do. So then you have to kind of find ways around that. You have to buff up your weaknesses. It'd be interesting to see what the true weaknesses of these aspects are as they're moving forward. But as you mentioned, Justice is the one that kind of has the most narrow scope so far. So but in its defense, it also has only had 1.5 expansion decks dedicated to it. I think by the end of the wave, one or two things have got to pop up that will stick out and stand out between the 3 cards, in the non-Justice deck, and then once we get to Scarlet Witch, see what happens there.
Yeah, I think that Justice tends to be a natural fit with the characters, or can be a natural fit with the characters that have under 10 HP to start with, just due to the fact that you have got things like Concussive Blow, which can allow you that free heal. So you're not really building your HP, but you're just able to replenish it more often. I wouldn't consider Black Panther at 11 HP a lower HP character, more the Hawkeyes and Black Widows of the world. So how did you approach building Black Panther Justice for the Rise of Red Skull campaign?
So as I said, I think anyone that has sometimes you're just looking at that 2 thwart. As soon as you go there, that's you can start to approach it a little differently. But definitely when he not only has a 2 thwart, but he has the tactical genius as part of his Black Panther upgrades. That also takes threat off schemes every time he pops a Wakanda Forever, which starts to become more and more common as you're getting through the game. So he only needs a little bit of help. And where I decided to give him that help was with the allies and with Clear the Area. He has one of the most efficient card pools. It sometimes takes a little bit to get going, and that can bite you in the butt. If going back to that same database, he actually has one a little on the low side of win rates, and I think that's why. It's because sometimes he can get to be a little bit slower start if you're not careful. So getting that extra card draw with Clear the Area and Skilled Investigator to get those really good efficient cards coming. But beyond that, it was really a lot of damage supplements like Followed, Beat Cop, Stealth Strike. I think that's kind of a essential card for Black Panther Justice, is to make sure he can get that minion control in with the Stealth Strike. Also, he has the Retaliate ability, and another part of that Black Panther upgrade entourage is the Vibranium suit, which I think that's the one. Which sometimes I get them mixed up. Yeah, the Vibranium suit is the one that moves a damage off. So sometimes you do want to just take a hit or go ahead and use your defense, right? If the threat's under control, and use your action that round to just defend and build up that little bit of damage on you, just so you can fling it right back out. So he ends up being very versatile, basically, if you go Justice with them, and can handle a variety of situations. I think anytime you're playing solo Justice, under surveillance is a almost an auto include, right? Because that 4 extra threat balance just goes a lot further away in solo. And then just rounding it out with those allies. Spider-Man's usually a little bit overkill in solo play. He's pretty expensive. I kind of think the dividing line is, if you're playing 1 or 2 players, you go Jessica Jones. If you're playing 3 or 4, you go Spider-Man. I think they kind of fill that same job. And then Daredevil, and if you need a retreat, Quake. So you can pull back and, heal up if you need to. And then, of course, since you are playing a little riskier game with him, a first aid or two is definitely does not hurt for Black Panther. Since you kind of want to take some hits to supplement your damage, both from the retaliate and that aforementioned vibranium suit. And then once you get going and you can get those card draws coming, I think whatever aspect you're playing with Black Panther, I think he's the only guy I almost always play, if not always play Nick Fury. I mean, plenty of guys I'll leave it out depending on what I'm doing, but yeah, getting those 3 cards later in the game to make sure that you can pop off 2-3 Wakanda Forevers in the same turn, that's pretty clutch.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously with Black Panther having the built-in double resources into his hero kit, and then you've got that ability to run all 3 of the basic double resources because he's not really concerned about any specific type of resource icon. Means that you can kind of play those splashier cards like Fury without the drawback of that being your only play for the turn or having to discard too many cards that you really want to get into play. And I think that, that's fair enough with Black Panther's kit that, as you said, you're playing a bit more of a control game.
Well, and the interesting thing about the Rise of Red Skull campaign is I did play on expert mode, of course. I think once you're fairly familiar with the game and you're moving away from playing out of the pack, expert's the way to go. Even if you don't feel you're ready, anyone who's listening there, I think just I think you just got to move that way if you're building your deck yourself. It's a sink or swim, and I promise you'll swim if you just give it a chance. But the vibraniums are really killer in Rise of Red Skull because you'll get a minimum of 2 experimental weapons showing up, and just having that card in your hand that can smoke them I think there's only one that you need one more resource than just the 2, but any decent Black Panther Justice build is going to have a variety of those resources. So but for 3 of the 4, that one vibranium card can get rid of it. In particular, if you know you're going to be blocking, you don't need the discard hitting you or any of the retaliates or any of that stuff. I think, he has a really easy time taking out attachments with that vibranium. So it fits the bill to being the most versatile substance on Earth.
Yeah, it is perfectly flavorful. I love that. So having said that, what did your results running that deck through the Rise of Red Skull campaign look like?
I feel like a little bit of a tool on that one because I noticed around Hawkeye, honestly, that all I was doing was going to that aforementioned spreadsheet, was punching in. I was like, man, I need to be writing these down. So I noticed I memorized the highlights, because we'll talk about something that happened with Black Widow that is slightly embarrassing, but I'll take it. But I want to say it was 5-2. Anyone who plays quite a bit of Justice knows you're more likely to actually fail out of a mission through the threat than you are getting killed, because that's where you end up kind of neglecting, or that's probably not the right word I'm looking for. You feel like you're more safe, right? That you can handle that getting closer to the edge. Same like if you're playing protection. I think the bulk of the time, if you lose with protection, you get KO'd. So it's funny that those two kind of work counter to what you think might happen. But yeah, you're definitely worried about getting KO'd with Justice. So you end up threading out, I think, more often, and protection, you end up getting KO'd more often. Quite a few guys that I know play on Expert and Heroic have said the same thing. That's just, you just play riskier on that side. That's just how it goes. But I believe if my memory serves me right, I did make a couple adjustments on Crossbones, but Crossbones is pretty swingy with things like full auto, Raid the Armory that can mill out the entire deck, and the next thing you know, you've got an acceleration token, which is very brutal in solo, even while playing Justice with those low thresholds. And I want to say I lost on Taskmaster for that very reason I just mentioned, that I let the threat build up to 6 or 7 and then an advanced hit, and then that was, the rest is history. We've all been there.
Awesome. Sounds like he's really quite viable for the Rise of Red Skull campaign.
Yeah. It's as long as you're paying attention, and maybe I should have just finished it off, but I think I just I had a couple minions that had come out right after advancing to his expert form, so I was just trying to clean up the board, and that's the one spot I left open was the main scheme, and I was about halfway there, and then it happens. Anyone that says that they win 100% on on even expert is probably flubbing something or retconning part of the game.
Funnily enough, until I tried one of the decks on this list, which was Hulk Justice, my win rate with Justice was 100%, but like my win rate with Aggression was dismal, like 20 or 30%. I think I was only about 70% or something with Leadership, and Protection was about 60, 65-ish. So Justice was, I feel pretty comfortable playing Justice.
Yeah, I think it's very viable to get Black Panther through on a clean sweep. Like I said, Crossbones is always going to be swingy. You're just going to have that 10-20% that's just there's nothing you can do. Depending on what treacheries show up, because that's the one thing that he doesn't have is that treachery mitigation. And so if the wrong ones show up, then it's, hey, it is what it is. But I could definitely argue that I could have prevented the Taskmaster loss. It was just a weighted risk, and I lost out on that weight.
So we've put the Black Panther list in the description. We're going to be putting all the lists we're discussing today in the description for you guys to check out. So if you're listening and kind of wondering about everything, just feel free to head to the Marvel CDB links and check it out and follow along with us. So next on the list, we arrive at Black Widow Leadership.
Pretty fun one.
Yeah, rapid response and recurring it with Safe House 29, and getting to potentially draw a card off of it and deal a damage when it pops is always an amazing feeling. So Leadership's a bit different to Justice in the fact that there's currently a couple of different builds within the aspect. There's obviously like the enter the battlefield spam stuff. Comes into play spam stuff, and you've got like the Avengers themed build. So how did you tackle this one with Black Widow?
The initial thought was pure Avenger. In fact, I gotta adjust the final list a little bit because I set a goal for myself at the start to not adjust anything unless I lost a match. But as I freed 3 guys in the Taskmaster scenario, I realized Avengers Tower wasn't going to work. So that was the one time where I went ahead and just threw the Avengers Tower and threw in Triskelion instead, right? Because those guys aren't Avengers. So that was the only, and then I beat the next 2 just fine. Those allies really do some work. But that was the angle, was to go Avengers. A lot of it centered around Goliath. And initially I think I had 3 get readies and 2 inspiring presences, but real early in Crossbones, I realized that inspiring presence is the one that you need a couple copies of, with just one copy of Get Ready to be able to pop him off or have him swing 4 times when you give him the +4 strength. So that's when I switched to the 3 inspiring presences instead, with a team training on the table as well. So that's the big thing, is that, and she can stall. That's the nice thing about Black Widow, is she can stall until you can get to that point where you can get him out there and just have him just pummel through the villain. So had a couple make the calls in there. Black Knight, both Hawkeyes, Squirrel Girl, of course, Winter Soldier's an Avenger himself. I oddly did not have any Earth's Mightiest Heroes in the deck. But that it basically came down to I wasn't using Black Widow in that capacity as much, right? I was usually swinging with the allies, whether it was Black Knight to take out tough icons, or Hawkeye was cleaning up the resources in my hand if I had a card left, or something like that. So it's I didn't end up putting him in there because of how I was just using them as they would get used normally anyways. But you could definitely work them in there. But I think I really focused on getting, of course, I had the 3 rapid responses, like you mentioned. That's clutch for Black Widow leadership. And then just getting that right mixture of inspiring presence and make the call. I went with Get Ready versus Earth's Mightiest, because I don't have to tap somebody with Get Ready, right? It's just a clean boom. I get a ready somebody without having to worry about exhausting somebody else. And my apologies, I'm using a Magic the Gathering term with saying tap. I mean to say exhaust. So if anyone's hearing me say the word tap, that's what I mean. That's the terminology in Magic the Gathering.
I'm definitely guilty of doing that myself. Tap and graveyard and library and stuff like that. So alone there.
So yeah, I started with the Avengers Tower, which just let me get that 4th guy out there, because it's real easy to have tons of Avengers running around at the same time, but eventually switched to Triskelion. Now this is where I was saying I did run into a little bit of an issue. I was switching out the modules for the different scenarios. And when I got to Absorbing Man, I put in a mess of things. And the first time I played it, it was either the first or second turn, my Shadows of the Past went off. And the whole top side of my deck ended up being a lot of upgrades, a lot of the preparations you put into play. So I didn't have a lot of ally help. So it was it ended up being kind of hard to clear them. Of course, then Scorpion ended up coming out later and tearing me up, and I just ended up stunned quite a bit. So I had a rough time even getting some allies on the table, just trying to survive, and I ended up losing. But what ended up happening was, it didn't dawn on me how rare that would have been to have both those minions come in, to have 2 minions hit on the table in that deck, because Raw, the only minion that would be in there is Scorpion. And one minion that's in there, he's a tough cookie, but I didn't think to take a Hawkeye out, because I was like, oh crap, these minions are tough. I need more minion mitigation. It just, I just didn't think about it. So this is where it's embarrassing, because I didn't really make the right adjustments. And somehow, no matter how much I shuffled that deck, I was just getting the wrong mixture of stuff. I was either getting all my preparations, but my Widow bites weren't coming up, or I was getting the make the calls would come up early, but there was no allies in the graveyard. So it was some rough shuffles, but I ended up having to play that scenario 4, I think maybe even 5 times which was it's Absorbing Man, but just wacky shuffles.
You had some issues with Taskmaster. I tried a couple of different Black Widow buildership and Black Widow leadership builds, and was actually got my ass handed to me by Crossbones. You mentioned how swingy he was. I think there was 2 times where I just got blown out by a full auto for like 8 or 9, because I was kind of pretty close to finishing him off and just had let the attachments build up a little bit. In his second
it's a common
stage
thing to do.
And I think one time I ended up going through the deck, getting the extra encounter card and getting blown out by like double advance out of nowhere. So it was, I think that might have even been on a turn where I was back in Natasha Romanoff form to heal. So yeah, I don't know whether it's just a low HP and Crossbone's aggressive nature but for me, yeah, it was that first one where I was kind of having issues actually.
Yeah. The Crossbones is definitely, like you said, he's swingy. There's just some things that can just happen there that's rough to overcome sometimes, that you're not fully expecting. Yeah, Absorbing Man's a little less so. So that I think that's where that's just it's a bit of an anomaly, and I think once you get to that third loss, just the frustration sets in. You just, you might miss something. And because I want to say I had 4 losses, and I think that I chucked the 4th loss into just me just not paying attention, just had to kind of walk away for a couple minutes, just like, why am I losing to this guy so much? And then finally came back and had one of the Goliath, like, not only took him out on his first iteration, but like that same turn knocked him all the way out on his final form. So it didn't even get a turn after that. And that's kind of where that deck sings, is, like I said, with those inspiring presences, the get readies and the team training, is trying to just really have Goliath go off the handle. And that would be the one case I would say, if someone could slip in some more Earth's Mightiest Heroes or something that you could. But I think a lot of us also like having that fairly widespread of tricks for Black Widow to be using by getting a target acquired in there. I think is almost essential, just in case Shadows of the Past pops and you got Taskmaster showing up as a boost card, and then some espionages are always good to get the loaded up hands, because that's you'll get a good chance of getting all those inspiring presences and get readies in the same hand if you can get some espionages to pop.
That is. You mentioned Taskmaster from Black Widow's Nemesis set. That is also an interesting interaction that can happen playing Black Widow into the campaign, that when you get to Taskmaster, her Nemesis ally won't actually appear. So I think it's Shadows of the Past that gains Surge based off that, because he doesn't enter play.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's also kind of funky as well. And so it can mean Shadows is pretty nasty in a couple of different ways. How consistently did you find that you were able to kind of hit critical mass with Goliath?
Other than that Absorbing Man debacle, 4 of the 5 games finished with that. So I had that right. I had those 4 losses on Absorbing Man. But we're talking almost everybody else was just him going nuts. I think the one guy I didn't do it with was Zola, just because there's that extra oomph. But with him, what ended up happening was I'd pop a rapid response, bring him back into play, thwart for 2 that turn, and the next turn just smack him for 5. And then rapid response, which would ping, thwart for, so I kind of had a little a trigger. So it was a few turnaround. But yeah, everybody else was critical mass Goliath and just go to Pound Town. It was oddly common to get 2 or 3 readies in my hand at the same time. And then, and then Red Skull, of course, was the like beyond the beyond. Like, whoa, well that's about a perfect scenario.
Is that how you're playing it? Were you kind of using the ready effects to play as resources to play other cards, or pitching them at the end of the turn during your first pass and looking to go off with the Goliath in the second run through your deck, or were you actually actively holding them?
I don't necessarily like to hold on to them. Black Widow has a real easy time of thinning her deck out because you can stack all of her preparations, right? Rapid response, I think, is the only one that's limited. Everything else can just hang out and sit out there. And then, of course, you've got, in the build I was using, there was 3 supports, Safe House, Team Training, and then either the Triskelion or Avengers Tower, depending on what point of the campaign it was. So it's almost half of her deck could be sitting out on the table, or definitely a third of it. And then between the allies and all that stuff. So to have those things stack in your hand all at one time just wasn't that uncommon. And with the rapid responses, right, of bringing Goliath back in, you have several opportunities for it to happen and to finally get that dream scenario where he's going off 4 or even 5 times with all those inspiring presences just all in there, which is kind of clutch. You need those because you need him to be able to heal up. Because he's doing 2 damage to himself, and so you kind of need to juice him up a little bit. But I mean, there's no better feeling than getting a Red Skull and then push him into his final form, and then having Goliath do 20 damage to him. It's just been okay, campaign over.
It just grows giant and starts wrecking the place. I love that thematically. It's great. I'm definitely looking forward to giving this list a more thorough try and hopefully comboing off with Goliath. That sounds like a really good time. So moving on, we've got Captain America Aggression. So obviously Captain America is the best character in the game, or definitely a tie with Doctor Strange. He's pretty good regardless of how you build him. I'm sure that one day I'll build Captain America basic and still have it be really good. So how did you approach Captain America in regards to building for the Red Skull campaign with the aggression aspect?
High risk, high reward. That's the best way to describe it. He actually has a lot of good pitfalls too. So he actually mitigates a lot of the risk. So there's cards that I think have kind of been pushed off as almost binder fodder already. Because everyone's like, why would you use these things? And Captain America is the prime target to use some of these things. So let's look at Captain America in general. He is a very well-rounded character, and Captain America is someone who does not have a weak aspect because you can always lean into whatever part of that aspect you need to, because he's got the other sides covered. He's got with his shield out 3 defense with the retaliate. He can re-ready himself, so you're doesn't matter what you're playing, you're always able to block. You're always able to. So when you're fighting these guys, like whether it's Wrecker or Absorbing Man or anyone that might have some kind of ability where if you don't defend the attack, something bad happens. Captain America never has to worry about that. He has the heroic strikes, which are maybe the best hero card in the game right now, outside of the invocation deck, but we won't get into that. But just doing 6 damage in a stun is huge, and he has 3 copies, and so it's consistent, and he has that resource that he needs within the super soldier serum. So it's really easy to get the physical resource and get the kicker. He's got the shield blocks, which drop the damage down to 0. I oddly don't use shield toss that much, but of course we are talking solo here, so the minions just don't build up that much. And then going back to that super soldier serum, he's got two resources sitting on the table, so there's a lot he can do in a single turn. So with Cap, he can mitigate so much of the risk in a high risk, high reward deck. It's like, why not go for it? So I had 3 counterattacks. I had 3 toe-to-toes. And the counterattacks would like, some people would think that that's overkill doing 3 of them. It's because you always want one on there in case you can use it. I'm a huge advocate that having deck consistency is clutch in many situations. It's not always vital, in particular when you have multiple cards that kind of cross over, but nothing really does what counterattack does or what you might need it to do. And so even though you only need one in, it pitches for the resource that you want with the strength. So it's not bad to have the 3 copies and just to make sure you can get one on the table when you can. So that combos with toe-to-toe, which for those of you that don't know what toe-to-toe does, it's a card that you choose an enemy, that enemy attacks you, and then you deal 5 damage to that enemy. And it costs 1 resource, so effective resource cost of 2, 1 resource in the card itself, to do 5 damage. And with Cap, if you're enticing someone to attack you, he retaliates for 1. So now we're up to 6. And if that villain just hits you for 6 damage himself, we just did 12 damage to somebody for an effective resource of 4. The counterattack itself, the toe-to-toe itself, and 2 resources. That's huge. That's huge damage. That's boom. That's blowing through some of these guys' identity cards right there. But here's a way to mitigate it even more. So you have the 3 heroic strikes, right? If I'm putting 3 drop kicks in the deck, that's 3 more stuns. So and then a Mockingbird. So that's another stun. So you're running 7 stuns on the villain in the same deck. It's very, very easy and extremely common to stun the villain, play a toe-to-toe, and then stun the villain again. So now you're rolling into the next turn when the villain's still stunned. And he never attacked you on the toe-to-toe. You just got 5 damage for 2. And so I want to say total time on this campaign it was definitely under 20. I'll just say 19 to be clean, but it was an under 20 turns total time it took me through to get the campaign, just because of how brutally fast he could take people out. And then I just made sure I took the recovery right on the upgrade, so then he could just juice himself up real quick on the first turn and then get going.
Yeah, it's you mentioned obviously that myriad of stuns that you get when you combine the Hero Strikes in his kit with Drop Kick and Blocking Bird. And it kind of, when I was approaching building it for the campaign, I did find that you could essentially play it like the stun lock deck that Cap can play with protection. Forget whether my build, I don't even know that I included toe-to-toe or counter-attacking in my builds. Definitely wasn't 3 counts of each.
It's definitely one of those where you want to get the timing down before you probably take that. But so you can build a much safer Captain America deck. I just think that he has a unique opportunity to have some real fun with those cards. And a lot of it comes down to one of the cards that gets written off in his kit as maybe the worst card, and that's Captain America's helmet. So what the helmet does is when Captain America would be defeated, set his hit point dial to 1 instead, then discard this card. So he takes the whole lot of damage, right? So it didn't matter what you were at. He doesn't get defeated. And so that 7-8 points of damage the villain just may have done to you off some crazy hit because they had a bunch of attachments on them or whatnot. You just stayed alive with Captain America's helmet and then popped counterattack and did all that damage right back to him. And they probably hit you off a setup from toe-to-toe, right? So total damage, you did 14, 15 damage to the villain. And that helmet saved you, and then you slip out and go into alter ego mode, and then just hang out there for a round. And Agent 13 is great at thwarting, right? She comes out and can really trash a scheme real fast. I made sure Braun was in there as some extra, just consistent thwart, chip away at the thwart, and also butter some people up, or butter. What's the word I'm looking for here? Just prep some people, right? Because I also put three relentless assaults in there as well. So if there was a minion, I'd just blow right through them and get that damage rolled up into the villain. And then, press the advantage was another big card. I made sure there was 3 of those. So there was plenty of turns where I was able to pop off a lot of damage, either from heroic strike and then pressing the advantage and getting a bunch of cards, or drop kick and getting cards, or slipping those toe-to-toes in there, or going with the counterattacks. So that all these cards put together just kind of form a weave, a network that just works great, to where it's whatever you have in your hand and however you can push it that round. And you've got shield block as a backup. You can always defend with Captain America during the toe-to-toes. And I finished all that off with a martial prowess, just to make sure I just had a whole bevy of resources between the 2 super soldier serums and a martial prowess on the table, giving me those physical resources to make sure drop kick was firing off without a hitch. Heroic strikes were strike without a hitch, and all these other cards were just flying through. So it was no problem to do 10, 12, even 20 damage in a turn.
Yeah, it's just business as usual for Captain America, really. Having said that, how would you rate this compared to Captain America in each of the other 4 aspects? Do you think this is potentially the best Captain America build, or where would you rank it in regards to the other?
Without a doubt, Cap aggression is his best solo aspect.
It's definitely really interesting, because obviously a lot of people rank the protection stun lock deck pretty highly, but
you can do the stun lock deck with aggression just fine, and I think it's better. And drop kick's better than tackle. You still get all the defensive perks, right? You still got the 3 defense, and with the retaliate, you still got the shield blocks. You still got the Captain America's helmet, and you can capitalize on that. I mean, aggressions, like I said, with the counterattacks, you can really capitalize on Captain America's helmet and use it to your advantage. So the only real risky part of this whole thing, like I said, is the fact that you're rolling into the next. A couple times I obviously was rolling into the next scenario with low hit points, but I just made sure I took the recovery upgrade to where he had a bigger pool of hit points. He had more recovery he could do, and if I ended up getting the apartment out and could slip back down to alter ego mode for a turn and get that extra card, that extra healing, and then just flip up the next turn. It was the rest is history. Like I said, it was an under 20 turn campaign from forward to back, and you can play it a lot safer. And it sounds like you tried it a lot safer, and it works just fine. To play Cap aggression, he actually can play a very safe, easygoing build. That's I would say is probably more flawless than the one I played, but not as fast and as furious. This is also a good the one that I put together. I think is really good 2-player. If you can get another guy playing protection or leadership with you, then this is a very, very good 2-player build as well.
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't actually considered the that wonderful interaction with Captain America's helmet and just being able to use toe-to-toe and counterattack and stuff like that. So I'm definitely eager to retry this deck and play it a bit more balls to the wall. I think we'll move on from Captain America because he does what he does.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think Cap is the best soloer. So you were You were mentioning Cap and Doctor Strange being up there. I think Doctor Strange is definitely the better character. I think Cap edges him out on Solo just because of how furious he can play. I think you've got just the swinginess of the game. I think Cap has a little bit better control of that swing when you're talking about Solo. I think he dips a little bit on the multiplayer because there's just a higher chance that Zemo shows up, and Cap. That's Cap's biggest downside is he has the worst Shadows of the Past pop in the game. It's bar none. Nobody's touches his.
Also, I think because if you've got more than one player, you've got more threat on schemes and stuff like that. I think and because you're seeing more minions, I think his ability to attack twice or thwart twice becomes less impactful as the player count kind of grows. Yeah.
He also has a lot of incentive to defend no matter what aspect he's playing as well, right? Because he can always re-ready and do something. And so another problem is it's really hard for him to clear his obligation because he's caught with his pants down, and so he can't exhaust because he already exhausted during in those multiplayer games, right? A lot of times if he's not blocking for himself, he'll block for if you're playing with a squishy ally. Cap's great to keep that guy protected and keep him in the game doing whatever he wants to do. And the downside of that is that sometimes that obligation does not go away and it just keeps cycling. So, yeah, Cap definitely gets the short end of the stick on the obligation in the Shadows of the Past side. But I think that's just a great for him personally. I agree with some of the guys that say that's not the best balancing tool in general. But for him, it really does end up coming in and balancing him pretty good against the rest of the field, in particular when you go to multiplayer.
So that's part 1, done and dusted, 3 decks down with 10 more to go. Please join us in a few days' time when we continue this discussion with part 2. Bye for now.